The music was playing, guests were smiling, cameras were ready. It was supposed to be the happiest day of his father's life. But just as the bride reached the altar, a small voice broke through the celebration. A young boy stepped forward, hands trembling, eyes fixed on the woman everyone was applauding. What he revealed didn't just stop the wedding, it froze the entire room. Faces shifted, whispers spread, and within moments, a phone was pulled out, and 911 was dialed. This wasn't a childish tantrum. It wasn't jealousy. It was something he had seen, something no one else wanted to see. Because behind the white dress and perfect smile was a truth tied to prejudice, humiliation, and a secret that could destroy more than just a marriage. The question is, how did a child uncover what every adult in that room ignored? Daniel Brooks had always believed in second chances. After losing his first wife years earlier, he poured everything into raising his son Elijah, teaching him to be respectful, observant, and kind, even when the world wasn't. Their life wasn't perfect, but it was steady. Sunday breakfasts, school pickups, quiet talks about right and wrong. Then Vanessa entered the picture. She was polished, well-spoken, admired by Daniel's colleagues. She volunteered at charity galas, posted inspirational quotes online, and carried herself like someone who understood compassion. To Daniel, she felt like hope returning. To most people, she looks like the perfect future wife. But Elijah noticed things others didn't. Small moments, subtle shifts in tone. The way Vanessa's smile faded around certain neighbors, the way her warmth cooled when his friends from school came over. Comments that sounded harmless at first, until they weren't. Daniel dismissed it as adjustment pains. Weddings were stressful. Blending families took time. He wanted peace, not conflict. And Elijah, only 12, didn't have proof, just a growing knot in his stomach that refused to go away. As the wedding day approached, that feeling only deepened. The decorations went up, guests confirmed their attendance, everything looked beautiful on the surface. But beneath the flowers and formal invitations, something was building. And Elijah knew that if he stayed silent, the truth would walk down the aisle unnoticed. At first, Elijah tried to convince himself he was imagining it. Maybe Vanessa didn't mean it the way it sounded. Maybe the tightness in her voice was just stress. But the small moments kept piling up, impossible to ignore. One afternoon, he came home early from school and heard her on the phone in the kitchen. Her tone was different, sharper, unfiltered. She laughed about how some people always played the victim. She complained that Daniel was too sensitive about race, that he was raising Elijah to look for problems where there aren't any. The words weren't loud, but they were clear. Elijah stood frozen in the hallway, backpack slipping from his shoulder. She wasn't just dismissing racism, she was mocking it. That night at dinner, Vanessa smiled sweetly and asked Elijah about school. Her voice was warm again, polished. But when he mentioned a history project on civil rights, her fork paused mid-air. She called it dwelling on the past and said people needed to move on instead of blaming others. Daniel gently disagreed, reminding her that understanding history mattered. The table grew quiet. Vanessa's expression hardened for just a second before the smile returned. Elijah noticed. The next incident was harder to brush off. Daniel had invited his old friend Marcus and his family over for a small pre-wedding gathering. Laughter filled the living room until Vanessa arrived. The air shifted. Her greetings were polite but distant. She corrected Marcus's grammar in front of everyone. She suggested they keep their voices down because the neighbors might misunderstand. When Marcus's teenage daughter reached for a second slice of cake, Vanessa commented about self-control. The room went silent. Daniel looked uncomfortable, but he said nothing. Later that night, he told Elijah it was just nerves, that wedding pressure made people act strangely. He didn't want conflict, he wanted happiness. But Elijah couldn't shake the look on Marcus's face as he left, embarrassed, diminished. Days before the wedding, Elijah found something he wasn't supposed to see. Vanessa had left her laptop open. A notification popped up from a private online group. Curiosity pulled him closer. What he read made his chest tighten. Posts filled with coded language, complaints about changing neighborhoods, mockery disguised as traditional values. Subtle but unmistakable. And there, in the comments, was Vanessa's name, agreeing, encouraging, planning. Elijah's hands trembled as he scrolled. This wasn't ignorance, this was belief. The woman about to marry his father wasn't just uncomfortable around certain people. She looked down on them, on his friends, on parts of his own family history. The wedding was less than 24 hours away. Guests were flying in, deposits were paid, the venue was decorated. Daniel looked happier than Elijah had seen him in years, and Elijah had a choice: stay silent and protect his father's happiness, or speak up and risk destroying everything in front of hundreds of guests. As the ceremony music began the next afternoon and Vanessa stepped into the aisle, radiant in white, Elijah felt his heartbeat pounding in his ears. If he waited any longer, it would be too late. And once the words left his mouth, there would be no turning back. The officiant had just asked if anyone objected. For a split second, the room held its breath in ceremonial silence. And then Elijah stepped forward. His shoes scraped softly against the polished floor, but in the stillness, it sounded thunderous. Guests turned. Cameras shifted. Daniel's smile faltered as he saw his son standing alone in the aisle, hands shaking but eyes steady. Elijah didn't shout. He didn't cry. He spoke clearly. He told them about the comments, the dinner, the humiliation, the online group, the posts Vanessa thought no one else had seen. He described the words she used when she believed she was safe behind a screen. Words about people who looked like his friends, like parts of his own family. Words that reduced entire communities to stereotypes. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Vanessa's face drained of color. She tried to laugh it off, to call it a misunderstanding, a child twisting adult conversations. But Elijah kept going. He described the exact phrases, the dates, the messages, too specific to be invented, too detailed to dismiss. Daniel looked at Vanessa, not with anger at first, but with disbelief. Then something worse: recognition. Because he had heard echoes of those phrases before. Small ones, subtle ones, moments he had chosen to ignore. A guest near the front quietly pulled out a phone. Another followed. Screens lit up as they searched. Within seconds, whispers grew louder. Someone had found the group. Someone had found her comments. Vanessa's composure cracked. Her voice sharpened, no longer polished, no longer careful. She accused Elijah of spying, of trying to ruin her life, of being too sensitive, just like his father. And that was when the room changed. Daniel stepped back from her as if seeing a stranger. His hands trembled as he reached into his pocket. The wedding music had long stopped. Guests stood frozen, unsure whether to leave or stay. The perfect white dress no longer looked innocent under the harsh glare of reality. Daniel lifted his phone. He didn't shout, he didn't argue. He dialed 911. And as the ringing echoed in the silent hall, one truth settled over everyone there. This wedding wasn't just ending, it was exposing something far bigger than a broken engagement. The police arrived quietly, but the damage had already been done. There was no dramatic arrest, no shouting match, just truth laid bare in front of friends, family, and a community that had almost applauded it. Vanessa tried to explain herself, to soften the words she had written, to blame stress, context, misunderstanding. But screenshots don't forget. And neither do the people who have lived through the kind of prejudice she tried to disguise. The wedding was called off before the officers even left the venue. Guests filtered out in stunned silence. Decorations meant to celebrate love became reminders of what had almost been ignored. Daniel didn't speak much that day. The realization that he had nearly brought someone into his home, into his son's life, who quietly believed others were less than her, it weighed heavily on him. But what stayed with him most wasn't the embarrassment. It was Elijah's courage. A 12-year-old had seen what adults overlooked. A child had refused to normalize subtle racism disguised as opinion. In a room full of grown people, he was the one who chose discomfort over silence. In the weeks that followed, conversations spread beyond that wedding hall. Friends talked, families reflected. Some defended Vanessa. Others admitted they had heard similar language before and stayed quiet. The incident became more than a canceled ceremony. It became a mirror. Because racism doesn't always arrive shouting. Sometimes it smiles. Sometimes it dresses well. Sometimes it sits at your dinner table and calls itself tradition. The question is, how many times have we witnessed something small, something subtle, and chosen to say nothing?